A homeless man asked Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett for just $1, but what she did next silenced an entire crowd and changed his life forever. He hadn't said much all day, not to the volunteers handing out sandwiches, not to the young couple on the bench who glanced at him and quickly looked away, not even to the older woman who dropped a few coins by his feet, mumbling something like "God bless you." He just stood there, clothes clinging to him from the humidity, denim stiff, with dirt shirt torn near the collar. He looked like he'd been walking for miles without a direction. His name was Roy, at least that's what it used to be when people still asked. Now he was just "Hey man," or "Move it," or the guy no one looked in the eye. The sun baked the pavement in downtown Dallas. Asphalt shimmered, exhaust fumes hung low. Roy stood across the street from the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center. A crowd had gathered, some reporters, some locals, a few kids on bikes, a couple of church ladies with folding fans. All of them craned their necks for a glimpse of the woman. Everyone came to see Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman. Sharp suit, calm walk, a voice that made people listen. She wasn't surrounded by a dozen security guards, just 2 aides and a smile that said she didn't need much more than that. She greeted people one by one, shaking hands, pausing to talk. Roy didn't care about politics. He didn't know who she was until he overheard someone say, "That's Jasmine. She actually listens." That last part stuck with him. He watched her for 20 minutes. She seemed real, but a lot of people seem real when cameras are rolling. His throat was dry, his stomach hurt. He hadn't eaten since the gas station clerk gave him half a burrito the night before. He'd asked for help before. Most times people didn't even slow down, but something in him said this time might be different. He stepped off the curb. Each step felt heavier than it should have. The sidewalk felt longer than it really was. People noticed him coming. Eyes moved, whispers stirred. One man shifted to the left, like Roy smelled bad. Maybe he did, but that's not why he was walking up. Jasmine saw him. He stopped about 5 feet from her, close enough to be heard, far enough not to make anyone nervous. Her smile didn't falter, but her body turned slightly cautious. Roy cleared his throat. It still came out raspy. "Ma'am." The sound barely broke through the crowd. She tilted her head. "Yes." He licked his cracked lips, nervous. "Can you give me $1?" That's all he said. That's all he could say. Everything went still. The volunteers froze. One of the aides subtly stepped forward like he was waiting for a signal. A camera swung in their direction. People braced for something. Maybe a polite brush off, maybe a look of discomfort, but Jasmine didn't move. She just looked at him, not past him, not through him, at him. There was something strange about that silence. It didn't feel tense. It felt real, like the world had paused for a second to see what she'd do next. Roy didn't blink. He wasn't begging. He wasn't threatening. He just looked tired, beaten down by life and sun and time. Jasmine stepped forward, not much, just enough to close the space between them. "What's your name?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything around them. Roy blinked. The question stunned him more than any answer would have. "Roy." She nodded slowly. "Okay, Roy, I'm Jasmine." No one said anything for a few seconds. A reporter lowered her mic, almost forgetting what she was supposed to be doing. The aide stepped back, and Roy, for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a problem to be removed. But this was just the beginning. What she did next would stop people in their tracks. Roy couldn't figure out why she was still standing there. Most people backed away or turned the moment he spoke. They usually had that same look in their eyes, the one that said, "I hope he doesn't ask for more." But Jasmine didn't look annoyed. She didn't look scared. Either she looked like she was thinking still. He half expected her to give a rehearsed line, maybe tell him where the nearest shelter was, or hand him a pamphlet. Instead, she asked again, slower this time, "Are you hungry?" Roy blinked. The heat made it hard to think, but the question cut right through the haze. He was hungry, of course he was. But more than that, he was tired of being ignored. "Yeah," he said. "I mean, I didn't eat since yesterday." She looked at one of her aides. "Mark, can you go across the street and grab him something hot?" Mark hesitated. "From where?" "Anywhere, somewhere that serves something with protein, not just fries." Roy was still trying to process what was happening. He glanced at the crowd, half of them pretending not to listen, the other half obviously eavesdropping. He hated being the center of attention, especially when he looked like this, but Jasmine didn't seem interested in putting on a show. She turned back to him. "Do you live around here?" Roy rubbed the back of his neck. "Not really, just move around wherever I can stay out of trouble." She didn't flinch. No pity, no disapproval, just more questions. "What happened?" "Roy, you got family?" He hesitated. He didn't like talking about that, but something about her tone made it hard to lie. "I had a wife back in El Paso. We lost our place after I got sick, couldn't work." She tried to hold things together, but it was too much. He paused. Jasmine didn't interrupt. "She left about 2 years ago. Said she'd call when she got settled." She never did. The sound of her breathing was steady, calm. She wasn't rushing to fill the silence. Roy couldn't remember the last time someone let him speak without cutting him off or rushing him along. I was a welder, he added almost like it mattered. I was good, never thought I'd end up like this, you know. I believe you, Jasmine said, two simple words, but to Roy they felt like something he hadn't heard in years. Mark returned, holding a plastic bag, chicken plate, rice, beans, bottle of water. Jasmine handed it to Roy herself. Thank you, he mumbled. You didn't have to. She looked him in the eye. No one has to do anything, Roy, but we should. He sat down on the edge of a planter, unwrapping the food with hands that trembled slightly. He tried to eat slowly, but he hadn't tasted real food in days. A few people started filming with their phones, Roy noticed, but Jasmine didn't seem to care. One reporter leaned toward her. Congresswoman, is this your way of addressing the homeless crisis in Dallas? She shook her head gently. No, this is my way of being human. Roy almost dropped his fork, not because of the words, because she meant them. You could hear it. The reporter tried again. Do you think this kind of gesture really makes a difference? Jasmine looked at Roy, then back at the reporter. Why don't you ask him? Roy looked up, surprised. All eyes were on him again. He wasn't used to being asked anything, let alone by a politician with cameras rolling. He swallowed hard, then said softly, yeah, it makes a difference. Maybe not the way you'll think, but yeah, I'm still a person. That's the part people forget. But Jasmine wasn't done, not by a long shot. What she did next changed more than just Roy's day. Roy had finished half the plate before his body reminded him to slow down. Jasmine sat beside him, not on the edge of the planter, but on the sidewalk itself, right there in her suit, legs folded, elbows on her knees, like it was the most normal thing in the world. A few people gasped. Someone whispered, she's gonna ruin her clothes, but she didn't seem to care. You said you were a welder, she asked, brushing some dust off her palm. Yeah, Roy said in between bites. Started young. My uncle taught me back when I was 16. By the time I was 25, I was doing double shifts at a shop in Odessa. What happened? He wiped his mouth with a napkin. Got laid off after the company downsized. Went independent for a while. Took gigs where I could. Then I messed up my back on a site in Fort Stockton. Couldn't get workers' comp. They said it was my fault for lifting wrong. Jasmine frowned. So they let you go? They ghosted me, he replied with a dry laugh. No job, no check, no help after that. I sold what I had, tried to make it work, moved to Lubbock for a bit. That's where my wife started drifting away. He stared at the food for a second. She told me I wasn't the same, and maybe I wasn't. When you feel like a bird and you start to act like one. I got quiet, angry, not at her, at everything. Jasmine nodded slowly. You ever try a shelter? Roy looked away. Yeah, a couple. Got my shoes stolen the first night. Next place, someone tried to sell me fentanyl like it was a bag of chips. I said no, and the guy followed me out. I've been on the street since. She didn't flinch. She didn't say I'm sorry. He appreciated that sorry didn't mean much after a while. Instead, she said, you ever want to go back to welding? Roy stared at her. What do you mean? I mean, do you still think about it, about doing it again? Maybe in a safer place with people who don't screw you over. Roy chuckled. I mean, sure, every day, but I'm 57. My back's not what it used to be. I don't even have an ID. Can't get a license. Can't get hired. Jasmine ought for a second. You know what I think? He raised an eyebrow. I think you've been invisible for so long. You stopped asking for more than the bare minimum, but you're not broken. Roy, just tired. He looked at her again, really looked, and you're not afraid to sit on the ground. He said. She laughed. No, my mama would probably cuss me out for ruining this suit, though. They both chuckled. A warm moment in a place that rarely gave people like Roy a reason to smile. Some of the crowd had moved on. Others stood quietly watching from across the sidewalk, unsure if they were witnessing something public or deeply private, maybe both. A man from the community center brought out a folding chair. Congresswoman, we have space inside if you'd rather, but she waved him off. We're good right here. Roy finished the last bite, set the plate down beside him. You really don't have to do this, he said again. I know, she replied, but I want to. Roy looked down at his shoes, worn down to the sole, duct tape on the side. I used to care about how I looked, he said, almost like he was talking to himself. Used to shine my boots every Sunday. Now I get nervous walking into a gas station. Jasmine was quiet for a second. Then she asked, what's the first thing you'd do if things turned around tomorrow? He didn't even hesitate. Call my daughter. That caught her off guard. You have a daughter? He nodded. Her name is Aubrey. She's 21 now. Haven't talked to her since she turned 17. She was mad at me, blamed me for everything. Maybe she was right. No, Jasmine said with a firmness that surprised even her. She wasn't. Life is messy, Roy. People fall apart, but that doesn't mean you don't get to come back from it. But the real surprise wasn't in what Jasmine said. It was what she did next in front of everyone watching. Jasmine stood up slowly, dusted off her slacks, then reached into her back pocket, not her purse, not her aide satchel, her own pocket. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then held it to her ear. Roy watched, unsure what was happening. Cynthia, Jasmine said, It's me. I need a room for the next 7 nights. No, not for me, for someone else. Clean place, safe near Lancaster, and grand, you know. The one, I mean, good. She looked at Roy. What size shirt do you wear? He blinked. A large, I think. Pants 34 waist. If they have a drawstring, even better. She turned away from the phone. And shoes 10 and A/2. Jasmine repeated the info to whoever was on the other line, nodded once, and hung up. She handed her phone to Mark, her aide, with a quick instruction. Tell them we'll reimburse. I want the room ready in an hour. And get someone to pick up clothes and toiletries. Full kit, nothing cheap. Mark hesitated for a moment. Do you want me to now? He nodded and stepped away. Roy sat frozen. He wasn't sure. He heard her right. You getting me a room? He asked slowly. I am, for the night. No, for the week. Let's start there. The words hit him harder than expected. His eyes welled up, but he wiped them quickly with the back of his hand. Why? He asked. You don't even know me. Jasmine crouched down again, this time with both elbows on her knees. Because somebody knew me once when I didn't have much, and they didn't ask for qualifications or references. They just saw I was falling and reached out. Roy looked away. Embarrassed. You're not falling, Roy, she said softly. You already fell, and you're still breathing. That tells me there's a reason you're here. Silence settled again, not the heavy kind, but something that felt like possibility. People began to move in closer, now drawn not by spectacle, but by the honesty of the moment. A young boy holding a football whispered, is she giving him a place to stay? His grandmother hushed him, but Jasmine overheard. Yes, she said, turning toward the boy, because he deserves one. Roy's voice cracked. You really think that? I don't think it, Roy. I know it. She turned to the crowd. I know people think helping someone like Roy is a waste, that it's enabling, that it's throwing money at a problem. But when did we become so cold that we can't help someone eat, sleep, and shower without feeling like it's a handout? There was a shift. You could feel it, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet realization among strangers who had forgotten what compassion looked like. Then Jasmine looked directly at one of the news cameras, now focused squarely on her. This isn't a campaign stunt. This isn't a donation. This is what people should do when they can. Roy looked down again, overwhelmed. Roy, she said gently, when was the last time you slept on a mattress? He took a shaky breath. 3 years, maybe more. Tonight, she said, you're going to sleep on a bed with clean sheets, a locked door, and silence. Not sirens, not people stepping over you. He let out a broken laugh. I won't even know how to act. Act like you matter, she replied. Because you do. But what Roy didn't know was that this day wasn't just changing his life. It was opening a wound Jasmine had buried for years. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows over the sidewalk. Jasmine stood quietly for a moment as her team handled the logistics, hotel, clothing, food drop-off. She watched Roy cradle the to-go plate like it was a treasure chest. His face had softened, still wary, still guarded, but the lines weren't as sharp now. That's when the memory hit her. A porch in Beaumont, early 90s. Her cousin Patrice, rocking gently in a squeaky lawn chair, 6 months sober, skin pulled tight from withdrawal. Jasmine was just 13. She remembered her aunt saying, don't get too close, Patrice always lets you down. But Jasmine hadn't listened. She brought Patrice a plate of chicken spaghetti every Sunday, not because it fixed anything, but because Patrice always cried when she ate it, cried, and said, you make me feel like I still got a soul. And then one day Patrice was gone, not missing, just missing from life, disappeared into the streets of San Antonio. Rumors said she ended up under a bridge somewhere off I-35. Jasmine never found out. That memory never really left her. It showed up in strange places, like today, when Roy looked up at her earlier, when his voice cracked, asking why it was Patrice all over again, the face of someone trying not to fall apart in public. Jasmine pulled herself together and walked away from the cameras for a moment. She didn't want to break down. Not here, not now. Her other aide, Gloria, followed her to the corner of the community center. You okay? Gloria asked. Jasmine nodded. Just needed air. You've helped folks before, but this was different. Jasmine leaned against the brick wall, eyes on the horizon. He reminded me of someone I didn't help in time. Gloria waited. Jasmine had never told the full story. I used to think Patrice chose that life, Jasmine said quietly, but no one chooses to feel discarded. They just get tired of begging to be seen. Gloria touched her shoulder. You did what you could, maybe, but maybe I was just a kid, and maybe I needed someone to tell me that a plate of chicken spaghetti isn't enough when the world keeps closing its doors. A long silence hung between them. Then Jasmine straightened her back. I couldn't save Patrice, but I can make damn sure Roy doesn't disappear like she did. Gloria didn't say anything she didn't need to. They walked back toward the sidewalk. Roy was now sitting on the bench outside the center, a bottle of water in hand. His shoulders were relaxed. For once, he didn't look like someone waiting for the next bad thing. Jasmine sat next to him again. I ever tell you I had a cousin who looked just like you? She asked. He glanced at her. Nah, you didn't. She was fire stubborn, funny as hell, got caught up in bad stuff. People stopped trusting her. She faded out. Roy looked down. That's how it happens, not all at once. People just stop picking up the phone. Exactly. She said, I think about her more than I let on today. Brought it back. I saw her and you. Roy swallowed hard. Then, I'm sorry. No, don't be. You reminded me that we don't get to quit on people just because it's easier to walk away. She looked him in the eye. You didn't ask for all this. You just wanted $1, but I see more than that. You're not someone to pass by. You're someone who got lost, and now you're about to find your way back. He held her gaze for a beat longer than he normally would. Trust didn't come easy anymore, but this felt real. But the story wasn't over yet, not even close. That first night off the street would bring something Roy hadn't felt in years. The motel wasn't fancy. It sat next to a laundromat in southeast Dallas, just past a mechanic shop and 2 taco stands. The walls were sun-bleached. The vending machine in the lobby was half broken. But Roy didn't care. He stood outside room 112, clutching a small duffel bag. One of Jasmine's aides had handed him. Inside were 2 shirts, a pair of black joggers, a belt, socks, a razor, toothbrush, travel-size deodorant, and a prepaid phone with one number already saved in it, J. Crockett. He opened the door. The bed looked brand new to him, not because it was, but because it had sheets that matched, a pillow without stains, and a corner folded with care. Roy didn't sit right, way. He stood there frozen. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to touch anything. Then his legs gave out, and he sat at the edge of the mattress. Slowly, he peeled off his shoes. One of his toes was raw. The sock had fused to a callus. He winced as he pulled it off. The bag had new socks, white, thick. He held them for a minute like they were made of gold after the shower, his first real one in weeks. He stood in front of the mirror. He didn't recognize the man staring back. His beard was still wild, but cleaner. His eyes weren't as sunken. The shirt fit. The pants didn't sag. He looked like someone you'd pass at a gas station. Without flinching that night, Roy lay down flat on his back, arms over the blanket, TV muted. He thought he'd cry. He didn't. He just stared at the ceiling, whispering thank you every few minutes. The next morning, he woke up at 6:12. Without an alarm, years of street noise had trained him to sleep light. But for once he hadn't heard anything. No shouting, no police radios, no tires screeching, just silence. He sat up, stretched, and felt something strange in his chest. Not pain, not fear, hope. There was a knock. Around 8 a.m. it was Mark. The aide. Morning, Mark said. Got breakfast for you and new shoes. He handed over a bag with a breakfast sandwich, orange juice, and a pair of gray walking sneakers, size 10, and A/2. Roy unboxed them slowly. He ran a finger along the curve of the sole. No holes, no tape. The laces weren't frayed. These for me, Mark nodded. All yours. Roy slid them on. They fit perfectly. He stood, bounced on the balls of his feet. It's been a minute since I had shoes that didn't lean to the side. Mark smiled. You look good, Roy. He looked down at himself again, then at the reflection in the window. Yeah, he whispered, I kind of do. They sat together for a few minutes while Roy ate. He didn't rush this time. I never expected this, Roy said between bites. I wasn't trying to guilt her into anything. I just figured if I asked for $1, maybe I'd get enough to buy a sandwich. Mark looked serious for a moment. You asked for $1. What she gave you was belief. Roy stared at the wall. You think people can really come back from all this? Mark didn't hesitate. I think people already have, every day. The hard part's believing it's possible when you're in it. Roy wiped his mouth with a napkin, then set the wrapper aside. I might call my daughter, he said. Not today, but soon, just to hear her voice. Mark nodded. I think she'd like that. Roy exhaled through his nose and leaned back in the chair. He didn't know what tomorrow looked like, but for the first time in years he wanted to see it. But what neither of them expected was what came next, a letter that would make Jasmine stop everything she was doing. 3 days after the encounter, outside the community center, Jasmine was on a Zoom call with a housing coalition in Baltimore. Her screen was filled with faces, charts, and numbers that blurred together by the hour. Her assistant Gloria knocked gently on the office door, holding a white envelope in her hand. It's from the motel, Gloria said. For you. Jasmine muted her mic, paused her camera, and took the envelope. Her name was written in shaky blue ink, no return address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. She sat down at her desk, unfolded it, and began to read. Congresswoman, I don't have fancy words, but I figured I should try. You didn't just give me a place to sleep. You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. I don't remember the last time someone asked me my name without judgment in their eyes. That day you didn't look through me. You didn't treat me like I was broken. I called my daughter this morning. Her voice cracked when she heard mine. We talked for 18 minutes. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I just told her I still loved her. She cried, said she wasn't ready, but she was glad I was alive. That's more than I had a week ago. I'm leaving Dallas tomorrow. Got a cousin in Amarillo who said I can crash on his couch. While I figure things out, told him I want to find work again. I don't know how it'll go, but I'm not scared anymore. You gave me more than help. You reminded me I matter. And maybe, just maybe, I'm still somebody's dad. Thank you, Roy. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, let her still and hand, her eyes welled. But she didn't wipe the tears this time. She sat in silence, letting it hit her. In all the noise of policy and speeches and headlines, this one handwritten note said more than any podium ever could. It didn't go viral. It wasn't retweeted. There were no hashtags. But it was real, and for her, that was everything. Later that evening, during a quiet dinner in her apartment, she reread the letter. She thought about all the Roys out there, the ones who never got their plate of food, their clean shirt, their phone call home. And she thought about Patrice. She whispered to herself, I couldn't save you, but I helped someone else get back. Then she folded the letter and tucked it between the pages of her planner, not for show, not for the story, just to keep close, a reminder of why she did what she did, not for applause, not for votes, but for moments like this. Because sometimes $1 isn't what someone needs most. Sometimes they just need to be seen. If this story touched you even just a little, don't forget there are people like Roy everywhere, not statistics, not background noise. People share this story, remind someone they matter, and if you're able, give someone a chance to feel human again. And if you're new here, subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be remembered. In a world where indifference is becoming the norm, this story is a powerful reminder that what people need most isn't money or promises. It's understanding and to be seen as human. Roy only asked for $1, but what he received was a chance to start over, because one person didn't look away. Brain, you don't need to be a politician to make a difference. Sometimes, just stopping, listening, and asking a simple question like, what's your name, is enough to change a life. Red Heart, remember that kindness is never small. A hot meal, a quiet room, a phone call to someone you love. Things that seem ordinary to us might be a miracle to someone who's losing hope. Balance scale if you're able. Help, without waiting for permission. Because like Jasmine Crockett showed us, she didn't help for the cameras or for votes. She helped because she could. And because she believed that everyone deserves a second chance. Speaking head, be the person who doesn't look away. Be the one who asks the name. Be the one who listens. Be the reminder that compassion still exists in this world. And if this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Retell it. Act on it. Because sometimes, what someone needs most isn't $1. It's to feel seen. Would you like this formatted as a quote, image, or a shareable card?